Hey everyone, a big welcome to the Forge Ahead show, hosted by me, Nick Elston, inspirational speaker, creator of unique mental health engagement strategies, a transformational speaking coach, and a mentor to have in your corner. The Forge Ahead show brings you the storytellers, the influencers, the people who have gone from adversity to excitement, forging something better, something beautiful, something powerful. So stay tuned, dive in, and be inspired by today's very special guest. Hey everyone, and a big welcome back to the Forge Ahead show, season 2, episode 21, and we're closing in on the final week of a podcast a day of season 2, and what a way to kick it off with actually one of my favorite people, Mr. Patch Warner.
Hello, how are you, Nick?
Hi, very good. You?
I'm doing all right.
Nothing but the progression as well.
Well, yeah, just got to keep it in check because sometimes it gets a little bit too long and it just needs tapering down. So this is, I tapered it a little bit in the last few days, but same to you, sir. Same to you.
Yeah, well, again, absolutely likewise. Is in the new way of cutting your hair using the dog grooming shears to cut my head and my beard at the same length all over. Basically like shaving a pool ball.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I go a little bit shorter than you though on top, but less said about that the better.
Yes, we could do the big reveal later on. It's fine. Right, let's introduce you properly because, like I said, we can very easily slip into this for an hour and nobody will know who the hell you are. So, okay, Mr. Patch Warner. So our paths first crossed when I first spoke for a leading bank that Patch works for and delivered some stuff. And since then, we just our worlds have kept on colliding, even in random places like St. Ives in Cornwall. Patch is the communication and culture manager for a leading global bank, a podcaster and media contributor, and also Bristol City fan. So this is interesting because given that we're recording this very soon after our demise into League Two as a Bristol Rovers fan, I've stood on stage in front of thousands. I've never done anything as brave as this, getting a Bristol City fan on straight after our relegation's been confirmed. So with all those things thrown into the mix, actually let's kick off with that. So your love for Bristol City and sport generally, it has to be said, isn't it? Where does that stem from? Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, like many people, it stems from parents. So my dad was a big Bristol City fan, grew up in Bedminster Down. So that's where the loyalty comes from. Because me growing up in Longwell Green and going to the Grange School, it was very much a Rovers territory. So you
grew up in Longwell Green, did you? So yeah, I grew up in Kingswood. And actually went to Kingsfield. It's obviously kind of like opposite schools, weren't they? They're kind of the
rivals.
Yeah.
Actually, I recognise you from the field, actually, circa 20 odd years ago.
Yeah, that's said about it. Anyway, carry on.
So I've just turned 40 in March. So
okay, I'm 43. I'm a little bit ahead of you. I was one of the bigger boys.
You were the bigger boys. The bigger boys came. Grew up in Longwell Green, and my dad sort of started taking me down to Ashton Gate probably around the age of 6, I reckon. I always trying to remember what my first game was, but I think it was Bristol City versus York. So yeah, they're going back a few years, and really just took to it straight away, and it really helped my development. I think I started, collecting programs, collecting statistics, got into sort of collecting stickers and cards and that sort of thing, and then obviously Euros and World Cup following England, it got me to know countries, flags, capitals, all of that sort of thing. So there are other things to football other than following the club, but yeah, been a big Bristol City fan ever since. Been a season ticket holder. I had a bit of a break in the middle where I was playing football on a Saturday.
Yeah.
But I would still try and get down for the second half and go to week games and things like that and travel. But yeah, it's been a real passion. A friend of mine was actually a player for Bristol City as well, Joe Burnell, who was actually captain. So that there was an internal interest as well as a fan. And I've just been a massive fan ever since. So yeah, big Bristol City.
That's another strip. We're going to probably cut across this. We've got really cross friendship groups as well, which kind of came to pass through the web of social media.
Small world, as they say.
It is. I mean, you mentioned Joe Burnell. Myself and Joe used to network together when I was back in the employed world. Also, friends with his brother Gavin, and have done for many years through.
Yeah.
People like Paul Gaynard and
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of Tom Bircham, a lot of the guys I used to work with back in my days at KN Office Supplies.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
and obviously Paul. Actually, it's an interesting one because Paul, I grew up with. I knew Paul since like literally the year dot, and always grown up together. So yeah, amazingly small world when you get going, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and you mentioned where we first met as well, and I literally walked in on your talk. It wasn't even my division that I walked in on, and I just sort of stood at the back and listened. And then I happened to be walking out at the same time as you, and literally we just connected and and hit it off straight away. And I got your card and then called you in to do the similar thing for my division. And then we just get talking and we find out that we've got all these connections.
It's amazing, and every one of them listens to your podcast. So as a podcaster, you're the founder or one of the founders, I believe, of Three Peeps and a Podcast.
Yeah, just over my shoulder here. So the passion for podcasting started in 2011 when I went to America and went on my cousin's podcast. And this was probably, within the infancy of podcasting. And it was just him and a friend getting together, big movie buffs. So they would talk about movies a lot. And I'm a big movie fan as well, as you can see over my
I love the
shoulder there.
Really cool.
Getting all the movie posters up. So we went on, spoke about that, and then we did the usual thing of Americanisms versus English words and what they mean and all that sort of stuff, and really enjoyed it. And then I came home. A few years passed, and I continued listening. I just thought this is something that I'd quite like to do. So I approached a couple of friends and who I met at a previous company and one through school. And yeah, we just started it in 2015 and we're still going now six years later. And the show's evolved really. It started out just the three of us chatting about whatever we wanted, whatever topic was relevant. Then we started to get guests on, a few celebrity guests. We reviewed events, restaurants, movies, nameless. And then it wasn't until lockdown last year that we expanded the offering and ventured into Bristol City podcasting as well. So we've got the Three Peeps regular show, which I said is anything goes more or less, and then we've got the bonus show, we call it, which is post-match reaction to Bristol City games and at the moment England games, and then Robins Reunited, where we get two ex-players and staff back from Bristol City old days to chat and just to shoot the breeze. So it's a really enjoyable for me to do all of them. Really, I love it.
That's amazing. A friend of mine, Mark Brimson, did a very similar thing with Retro Rovers podcast, and again co-hosted too. But so your experiences of running a podcast is, and it's a very popular podcast, as we said. It's now hosted on BBC Radio as well, isn't it? As I believe.
Yeah, thanks. So we formed a relationship with Radio Bristol, and going back sort of 4 or 5 years, I first went on Radio Bristol with Jeff Twentyman on Sound of the City, which is Bristol City fans forum, and from that really became friends with another number of radio DJs at Radio Bristol, and a number of them have since come on the podcast. Emma Britton, James Hanson from The Breakfast Show, and Adam Crowther, who's responsible for BBC Upload, which is where you can upload new music, poetry, and podcasts. So we uploaded it there, and we went in the studio. Been on his show several times, and we were actually scheduled to do episode 100. We're now on like 160, but we were episode 100 was going to be us taking over Radio Bristol live for an hour.
Wow.
Because the producer liked the format so much, and Rich behaved himself and didn't swear. so we managed to have that ready to go, but unfortunately the pandemic came along, and we're now aiming for episode 200 to be live on Radio Bristol.
That's amazing.
But yeah, no, it's great to have that relationship, and yeah, long may it continue.
Do you want to give a name check to your fellow co-hosts and the fat co-founder?
Yeah, I do. So we formed the podcast, as I said, in 2015, and it was Rich Brown and Mike Pedley. And unfortunately, we actually lost Mike to cancer in
Oh,
May
mate, I'm so
2020.
sorry.
Yeah, so Mike got ill the first time, sort of 3 or 4 years ago, came through it, and unfortunately, it came back. So yeah, we actually lost him in May 2020. But sort of his wish was that we carried on and plowed through. So yeah, every episode really we do. It's a way of remembering him, and because we've been in a pandemic ever since he passed away, it still doesn't seem like real because we haven't got together, and we still haven't got together to actually do a podcast. We're all doing them over Zoom. So yeah, one day it will hit, I'm sure. But yeah, we still, still do it and still remember Mike every day. So that's the regular show, and then the bonus show is actually someone that I met by going into Radio Bristol and going with Jeff Twentyman, and that's Matt Withers. So he's my co-host on the bonus show. So yeah, shout out to all of those guys who've all been instrumental in making the podcast what it is. And as you said, yeah, it's more and more popular. The Bristol City content has given it sort of a target audience, which has really helped, and some have then converted across to the other show. And obviously a big coup for us was getting Steve Lansdowne on back in April.
Wow.
And yeah, that went down really well. We asked him some questions that hadn't maybe been asked before, and he gave us the answers. He was absolutely superb. Steve was. He didn't want any questions up front, didn't shy away from any questions, and yeah, it got real good coverage, that one, in the local press and local radio. So yeah, I'm looking forward to next season of actually getting back down the ground and watching the games.
Mate. I mean, we're recording this the morning after the England-Germany game, and just seeing the kind of people in the stadium, you just want to be there again. I mean,
yeah,
on a micro scale when it comes to the men, but
yeah, not quite falling over the barriers and the carnage that I saw, or limbs as it's known. But yeah, but fantastic that was.
It's an interesting one because we have on the Forge Ahead show for the next season, we have Tom Gorringe coming on, the one of the commercial director, the commercial director at Bristol Rovers, and it's interesting that, again, in the same vein, he hasn't asked those kind of questions up front. I think as an independent podcast, unlike the kind of the national networks, we kind of have a little bit more freedom, don't we? We're not tied to an agenda, or we're not restricted by what we should or could say. And it really comes down to, like we're doing now, human to human conversations. And actually, people are very inclined to open up if you have human to human conversations, aren't they?
Absolutely. And yeah, we've had Jeff Twentyman on the show, as I've said. So it was great to get him on so that he could talk his mind, and talk about his experiences, and let himself free a little bit, because he, as much as they all do a great job, they are shackled by what they can say, who they can promote, their opinions and things like that, because they're working for the BBC at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So as you say, independent podcasting, and I think Bristol City have sort of caught on to that a little bit from our podcast and a number of other city podcasts. And this season already, in the month that it's been going, that they've been sort of back at training and interviewing new members of staff, just seems to be less formal, more shoot from the hip, more sat there in skivvies, that sort of thing. And just releasing that rather than polishing it all up. And that's sort of our podcast in a nutshell. It's really informal. You never know which way it's going to go. Michael has described it brilliantly as tangent heavy, so we can go off in any direction. And that's what I really enjoy. I don't like scripts, when I'm working. So I will probably come onto my work in a minute, but when I'm doing that, it's really unscripted, and I think people have sort of cottoned onto it and enjoy it.
Yeah, I very much refer to it on the show as rabbit hole syndrome. I very often quickly go down rabbit holes, and then there's a whole new set of rabbit holes, and I really got to try and keep focused as much as possible.
Well, exactly. We very early on, we interviewed Justin Lee Collins, who's a comedian from Bristol, and we had, it was the first big interview that we had, and we had a list of questions, like a massive long list, and we got through 3 questions because we asked question 1 and then we went off down that road, and then we very quickly thought, oh God, we've got to come back down this road, and then we did that road, and then
genuinely, it's certainly kind of, especially with people that you just connect with, you forget you have an audience, you forget you're being recorded and something.
Yeah, pretty much like now.
Yeah, exactly. Which can be a really dangerous territory for a lot of people. But you mentioned like the studio, and that's something that's kind of come up around the past 18 months. You've mentioned your love of movies, but tell us about the actual studio and how that came about. And also the lighting thing is really cool as well.
Yeah, so studio is a very grand term. It's more of a garage conversion that has got a podcast microphone in it. But, we did go to some efforts to insulate it pretty heavily for sound and for warmth. So obviously, we started working from home in March 2020. And I was working on the kitchen table, working on the sofa, working up in the bedroom, and just trying to escape the noise, quite frankly. I've got a 3 and a 6-year-old who don't understand that they need to be quiet. So that's not always straightforward. And then recording podcasts and things like that I was doing throughout that period became harder and harder because there would be an interruption and things like that. So we decided to take the garage and split it into 2/3, and now 2/3 of it is the room I'm in now. And it's a real, not safe haven is a strong term, but it's somewhere I can go. I can shut that door. I can even lock the door, that leads into the garage, and just be by myself and be with my thoughts, because it's been really tough for all of us. But yeah, I was really struggling come sort of September, November, December. And this has really changed my life, I'd say, because it's given me somewhere I can come, do the podcast, no fear of interruption, come out here during the day, do my 9 to 5, leave it. The best thing is I can leave everything here and it will still be here when I come back, because I'll come back to the kitchen table and my mouse would be gone, or the pen would be gone, or sometimes the laptop would be sort of turned upside down and things like that. So that's one of the big wins, is that I know where everything is. So literally I've got my coats in here now because I could never find them. All sorts going on. And I've got a TV as well that I can come out on an evening and watch, some scary zombie film that my wife doesn't want to watch and things like that. So yeah, really, really has given me a new lease of life, which we all need when we turn 40, I think, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I think they call it a man shed.
Man
cave, a man cave, isn't it? And a female version is she shed. So we've all got a place to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you mentioned zombie films. When I asked you for a headshot, didn't quite shoot you in the head.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of our segments in the podcast is recommendations at the end, and if I can throw one out there, Black Summer. Okay. I saw it on Netflix a couple of days ago, and I just thought, another sort of spin-off of Walking Dead.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic. I cannot stop watching it. It's a scare every minute. It's very, very, very easy to get into.
Is it a series or a movie?
It's 2 seasons on Netflix. So yeah, I'm halfway through season 2. So yeah, have a look at that one if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, talk about recommendations. You mentioned your love for the movies and stuff. Tell us about that. What apart from zombie films, what else are you into?
Well, yeah, I mean, zombie films are few and far between, but I'm very much like music, which I guess we'll come on to as well. Anything really. There's I've got a massive fan of people like Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, and very early on in my life, obviously got into Star Wars, which has become a big part of all our lives for the last sort of 40 years, with the first 3 and now the last 3 completed, and now all the spin-offs. So very much into sci-fi. Always been a big fan of horror as well. I just like a good scare.
Yeah.
It just gives me a shot of adrenaline.
You should try coming down the mem. Yeah,
well, yeah, I did.
Quite a few of them.
I did try that. It was more of a comedy show, but we won't go on to that.
I asked for that. To be honest, I didn't ask for it.
But my wife loves watching romantic comedies as well, so that's something we like watching together. Yeah, and really, as you can, I don't know if you can see many of my posters behind, but you've got everything ranging from Gladiator to Con Air, all sorts going on up there. So I love watching a great movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's just somewhere you can get lost for a few hours, and God, have we needed that for the last 18 months, whatever it is now, lose count.
Well, this is, you've alluded to it, and I think this is actually one of the things that first really drew me into you as a man, is that you, without kind of generalizing too much, in a corporate environment, you very rarely see true vulnerability and authenticity from men, especially when it comes to things like mental health and how you genuinely are feeling. And you were very quick to go there with those kind of conversations, which automatically pulls me into people, because you form that kind of emotional bond to people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you very kind of openly shared just now that the end of last year was quite a tough time.
Yeah.
The pandemic generally, what's that look like from kind of for you? And when you are feeling in that kind of space, how do you bring yourself back?
So you're right. I'm a very open book, but can also be, sometimes a closed book, like most of us. But in a work environment, I like to be open, because then it will hopefully make other people feel like they can speak their mind and be open. And we actually formed the Mental Health Allies back in April last year, and it was a group of us that I think people get together and form these sorts of groups are all people that have had some exposure to or experienced it, lived experience, like yourself. And until you've actually experienced something, it's very hard to understand it. So what we're doing is trying to open up people's minds to, what it's like to have experiences of mental health and how to best deal with them as well. So it was great to pull that together, and we get together on a weekly basis and go through what we can actually do to help people. We created this connects, so we put two random people together to have a conversation, and it might be someone you've never met before or someone you used to meet every day in the corridor.
Yeah.
So getting those people back together. We also focused heavily on fun, and I think in the sort of the first year, so throughout 2020, we all did numerous Zoom quiz, and yes, they have become a bit onerous. But for a good sort of 8 months, they were pretty much all we could do. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So I enjoy hosting those sorts of things and hosting quizzes. We had a Got Talent event where people would send in videos in various categories and things like that. We had Mastermind, Connect 4. My role as well, I enjoy creating, as well as podcasts, vlogs, video blogs.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of face to camera. We actually did about 5 or 6 lip syncs as well. So pick a song.
I've seen them. Absolutely brilliant. You very kindly forwarded those on to me.
I
really
did.
Good. Really
and they went down so well. They went up to sort of director level. They all wanted me to do a lip sync for them as well. So yeah, it's and again, really enjoyable to produce, and guarantee puts a smile on people's faces. And we raised about £3,000 for Mental Health UK as well off the back of those, because it takes some guts for the people to do it. It's put everyone out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
It takes me quite a lot of time, personal time as well, to actually put it together and make sure the lips will line up with the words and things like that. So yeah, the Mental Health Allies is something that I would recommend to anyone who's listening to set up in their area. And going back to work, which October time at the moment, it's looking like everyone's going to need a bit of support. It's going to be so strange not to just get up and walk into the garage, or for other people walk into wherever they go for work. And as much as I'm thinking I can't wait to get back, it's just going to be weird. So it's going to need people just to have a chat with, just to bounce something off. So many people will just plop themselves in a corner, open their laptop, and carry on being introverted, which even the biggest extroverts have become a bit more introverted in the last in this period. So yeah, it's gonna be a bit of a strange time, but we'll all get through it.
It will be, and you touched on something that's a really powerful point, that the reason why people like yourself and like people in your group and people that become mental health first aiders, and the reason they get into that position is because, like I said, they have had experiences, either firsthand or through somebody close to them, of mental illness and mental health challenges. So actually the passion is there, a genuine passion to create positive change is there. However, nobody signed up for a pandemic, and actually we can be naturally sensitive to taking on the burdens of other people. So potentially you could end up carrying a lot of burdens in that part of the community. So it's absolutely about self-protection. How do you protect yourself when you're having these conversations?
Yeah, and I open up to the group, and it's great that we meet once a week to generate new ideas and support other people. But it's also a bit of a support group for us. You know, my up until about 4 years ago, I'd never had any experiences, and then I decided that I was going to have an extension built on my house, and decided at the time I was a project manager. I thought, how hard can it be to project manage that, bringing all of the various, you know, tradesmen in to get all the work done. And yeah, that wasn't as straightforward as I expected, and it got to the point where I had a mental block about where to put light switches and plugs and things like that. And then during that time as well, we found out that we were having our second child, and at which point we literally a few weeks before we had decided that we were going to stick with one, because we had IVF for the first child, and it was at a point where we thought, are we going to sort of roll the dice again and go for number two? And then we said, you know, no, we're going to stick with one. And then, you know, a minor miracle that my wife fell pregnant, and that all came during the time where I was, you know, wavering, so to speak. So yeah, that was about 4 years ago, and I've been fine since, but I've now had dipped my toe in the water of what, you know, what can go on. And having two young children as well, it tests me. And I'm not speaking for everyone else, but I know other friends that have gone through that as well. You know, the whining, the crying, the shouting for no reason. It just, you know, I don't know how some people cope with it, and doesn't seem to affect them. But again, another reason why this safe haven here has really helped me, because I can just literally, you know, remove myself from the situation sometimes. But
we all need that. The problem is, I mean, as you know, I deliver my stuff kind of all over the world, but so in the US the culture is very different, as you know, from being there yourself. But in the UK, self-care can sometimes be considered as selfish. So we'll feel guilty if we snuck off to our man cave. We will feel guilty if we took ourselves away and we wanted to recharge. And it's a wrong way of looking at things, isn't it? It is absolutely about that kind of old airplane adage, to put our oxygen mask on first to be strong enough to help everyone around us. And if you didn't do that, you couldn't help your family, your colleagues as effectively as you do.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't walk out and leave the kids there by themselves. My wife is so understanding that she
just in case anyone's watching.
Yeah, exactly. But she's a school teacher herself, so she's, you know, used to the noise, used to the childness of the kids, whereas I'm not. You know, I've got my own children, and I've never really experienced anything else. So and they're so well behaved, you know, compared to some kids that I know my wife, you know, will be dealing with. So it's it's just one of those things that she knows that I've just nipped out to calm back down again, or to just rebound and come back stronger. Because otherwise, if you sort of sit there and it builds up and builds up and builds up, yeah, then it's going to affect you, isn't it? So yeah, it's been great. And walking as well has been such a big thing for me. You know, getting out, trying to get those 10,000 steps in a day. And yes, I could go for a run, but it would be a shorter time. So if I go for an hour and a half walk, that's an hour and a half of thinking time, processing time, and come up with some great ideas. I've got my notes app on my phone, and think of things I could say on the podcast, think of people that I could approach to interview, think of work stuff. And for me, that's just, you know, I didn't really go for a walk in 2019 and before. It was either a quick run or a 5-a-side or whatever. and walking is just again, all we've got to focus on all these positives that have come out of lockdown, and that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your happy place, obviously being in the studio where you're sat at the moment, but we also have a shared kind of happy place in Cornwall. I think pre-pandemic, I would spend maybe 4 or 5 weeks of the year in St. Ives, around that area in Cornwall. It's kind of like my happy place, I guess. And certainly when we went down a few weeks ago, it was so nice to be back, and you can kind of properly recharge. But when I was walking around there once, somebody shouted out to me, and it was you. So Cornwall's a happy place for you as well?
Absolutely, yeah. One of those places I've been going pretty much all my life. I was actually there three or 4 weeks ago as well, and it was that half-term week where the sun was shining. Literally at the beach every day, Porthgwydden Beach, the number one beach in St. Ives. And yeah, when we're even driving down, once you get past that sign that says "Welcome to Cornwall," you just drop, don't you? Just think, yeah, I'm back. But I don't like to promote St. Ives too much because it becomes too busy. Because it is the best place in the UK.
Don't go there, it's rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but what we're saying is absolute tripe. So there's so many decent beaches, decent restaurants. Some of the pictures we've taken, everyone sort of says, you can't surely be in the UK. It looks like the Caribbean. The sea is blue. It's just unbelievable.
By sheer coincidence, the week we were down there was a G7 summit.
You were there then, were you?
Yeah, I genuinely didn't. It was a week after, wasn't it? Half term, I think.
Yeah, it was.
And genuinely didn't know that was going on. It was such a surreal experience to take that walk through the cliffs of Porthminster into Carvis Bay. You get to a certain point, and police marksmen then say, "No, you're not going to go there." Maybe it's just me. Maybe it just looked dodgy, but basically, every clear gap they had in the bushes from the cliff tops, they had a marksman and somebody making sure that you couldn't get a clear shot of Forest.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, well, we were there the week before, as you say, and there was Chinooks going over and test runs and all sorts going on. So
it was interesting. It felt quite kind of apocalyptic to look out the apartment window in the morning and see the HMS Prince of Wales aircraft carrier just off the shore. It was weird.
Yeah, no, it was, but we absolutely fantastic, and it's somewhere that it's a 3-hour drive for us here in Bristol, and it's just far enough, and not too far to nip down for even a 3-day visit.
It's beautiful. It's good enough for Boris. It's good enough for me. In fact.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned music there, and like I said, I did want to talk about music. And how important is music in your life?
Well, do you know what? Until podcasting came along, I would say it was more important because I don't know what started it, but I will go to sleep with earphones in, and have done as long as I can remember. Even going back to teenagers, I had a little radio in my room, and I would listen to Late Night Love with Dave Barrett. Dave Barrett.
That's right. Yeah.
And then it was Graham Torrington, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would, I would listen to that just to have something to listen to focus on not thinking about trying to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I think that's just carried on. So now I listen to podcasts when I go to sleep. But music has always been something that I'll listen to maybe in the car. I've started listening to it again now that I've got my own space and I've got a good system in here that I can, and again, because I'm in a garage, I can have it as loud as I like, without anyone telling me to turn it down.
Yeah.
But in terms of what, so I went on Desert Island Discs actually on a Radio Bristol version of that, and did the story of my life through music.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember now what they were, but I think growing up it was mainly Queen, because my dad was massively into Queen, and obviously the Beatles, Beach Boys, Elvis, that sort of thing. Then sort of into the teens, you start to develop, and you basically listen to whatever is on trend at the time and what your mates are listening to. So with several groups of mates, some were listening to R&B, some were listening to Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, all that sort of stuff. Some were listening to Take That, Backstreet Boys, Westlife. So I listen to all of it. Nothing's
Yeah.
off the table. And then, as you then go into meeting my wife and the wedding and things like that, obviously you get the love song for the first dance. So yeah, really eclectic. But if I've got something on in this room, it's rock, heavy metal.
Nice.
Or if the sun's shining, then it's sort of Ibiza chill. So very, very varied.
I like that. I think that was because I was watching the Noel Gallagher documentary on Sky Arts recently, but I've kind of tapped back into, as everyone knows, I'm a massive country music fan, but in terms of that kind of era going through my kind of teens, it was always pretty much Oasis, to be fair. Oasis was the soundtrack of my kind of formative years of drinking and going out and that kind of stuff. And
absolutely,
I've kind of tapped back into that again recently. I think Oasis, that you don't realize how good they were, as in musically good.
Well, and the number of hits,
enough to appreciate it.
Yeah, the number of hits they had as well. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it takes me back to Euro 96, which obviously at the moment, when we're recording this, we're in the middle of the Euro 2020, 2021. And yeah, it takes me back to Euro 96, Oasis, Blur, all that sort of stuff.
So last night was England, Germany. So no spoiler alert, it's already happened. But obviously when we were just saying it 1-0, and especially when Muller went through on goal, we were kind of thinking, oh, geez, here we go again.
Yeah.
But then we banged the second in, and that was the rest is history. But I think the tournament, up until the night before with the I think it was the Spain game and the France game,
yeah,
they really kind of ignited it, and I think it's really taken off now. But it was the seeing and hearing and feeling people back in the stadiums again. That's the real impact. Singing Three Lions last night afterwards, like the goosebumps literally came up. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's been such a revelation to get the crowds back in, and I think it is Budapest where you first had the 60,000 people.
Yeah,
and I massive football fan. I used to I would watch Match of the Day every Sunday morning. Last season, I hardly watched it. I just could not get into it because there was lack of crowds. Obviously, I watched every Bristol City game because I'm sort of emotionally invested, and I'd watch that with no crowd. Obviously, want to be there, but if you're watching as a neutral, you need the crowd to feel the emotion. And you're right. Like last night, 40,000 people at Wembley. It just felt like we were back to normal.
Yeah, and it sounded like a full house. And
yeah,
I think, like you said, that like everything, I guess, like everything that we're doing virtually, it's good enough to watch it on iFollow, but it's not the same. There's a disconnect, and especially most of the time, my kind of group of friends that go to football with are Mark and Ollie, and some of my family as well. My sister will go to football. We always say the football ruins a good day out. So actually, we were getting the worst bit of the deal without the social elements.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't thought of it like that. You're so right. Especially when we go away to London, it's like, should we just stay in the centre of London?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so I think it's really plain to see. It's a reason why I wanted to talk to you about these things in this kind of order, I guess. Not that we're going to put any order on our conversation. It's plain to see from what you're about as a man, as a human, as a person, all your interests, that your role as a communications and culture manager, I mean, like I said, communications, your media work, your podcasting, and the culture, your passion to support positive mental health. I mean, that seems to be the perfect role for you, right?
It's great. It's crazy how my role has developed. So I went to university, did accounting and finance, went to Hargreaves Lansdowne, had an accountancy role there, which I absolutely loved. Then I sort of qualified as an accountant, a management accountant. Went on to the bank, as you say, and within a couple of years, my role sort of changed and merged into sort of like a change manager, project manager role.
Yeah.
And it was at this point that I started the podcast outside of work. And very quickly I thought, well, this podcast is something that I could do in work and interview people as we are now, get to find out more about them. And no one was doing that. Everyone was, it was very much emails and meetings. So started that. Then one of the projects I actually managed was to roll out like an internal Facebook for work, which was a collaboration tool, communication tool. And at this point, I'm already sort of, leading the social committees and all of that sort of stuff. Anything that happened in the Bristol office, I was usually in and around organizing or hosting. So all that sort of merged together, and they just said, well, you should probably be doing this as a job, communications and culture. And then the bank went through a bit of a transformation, and a communication and culture became a role. And, obviously applied for that, went for it. And 2.5 years later, maybe even 3 now, lost track of time completely.
You both.
It's something that I'm doing full time, and the production of video blogs, the production of podcasts, driving the culture forward, and then almost taking that culture on the road, really, and showing everyone else this is what we do. Take from it what you will.
Yeah.
It's certainly working for us. We've got a flexible working arrangement with all the staff, and it gets the best out of people. The productivity has gone up. The engagement scores are going really well. So, yeah, as you say, perfect job for me. I mean, at the moment, working from home, as I say, it's really flexible. I can go off for an hour and a half walk. This afternoon's my little girl's sports day at work, so I can go off and do that. And then I'll come back later on and I'll finish off whatever I was doing, after I put the kids to bed. So that's the way it seems to be going. And the more people get involved in that and see the benefits, I think the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, how do you see things like from a culture perspective moving forward? I think it's quite dangerous maybe to assume that we know or can guess what's going to happen next. But I think in terms of if things are rolled out and things happen as they plan to be, how do you think it will be from a group perspective, a corporation perspective, in terms of things like hybrid or home working or flexible working or coming back into the office? How is that looking for the plans to put that back in place?
So my opinion on that is that we will go to a hybrid in the main.
Yeah.
We will be in the office 2 days a week, and continue to work from home 2 or 3 days a week. And you won't go into work to sit in a corner of a room and be on a laptop. You go in there to have a chat, collaborate with people. We've all got everything on our phones now, so we literally can just take our phones and still get the benefit. So it'd be to go in, get back into a meeting room. There's lots of planning that we do where it's not easy to do virtually because everyone sort of has an idea, they talk over each other, and that's one of my pet hates. Goes into my room of doom on the podcast, is talking over because you try and get something across, and someone else will talk because there's that delay, and it does happen. So I'll just sit back, and then I'll say, "Oh, Patch is really quiet." Yeah, I can't get a word in edgeways.
What are the most popular things you see put into the room of doom?
So the biggest one at the moment, and it's come up so many times, is the merge in turn debate. Okay, let me explain. So you're going down the ring road, the Avon Ring Road, the A4174, and as it is at the moment, one lane, it says about 600 yards, this merges into one lane because they're working on the bridge or cutting the hedges or whatever. And this is going to split opinion, but hopefully most people will be in my court. So people will get in lane 600 yards early, and then left-hand lane, which is empty, I'll go down it. And a number of people do it. But some people will straddle both lanes to stop me from passing and stop me from using all available road and not causing a traffic jam half a mile back up the road. So it's a debate that comes up every other podcast. Wow. And often there will be, people that will agree with me to use all available road and just not, just merge in, just merge in turn and everyone can go about their business. So that is the most popular one that we've had, I'd say.
That's really interesting because it does align with through the speaking academy that you've attended that I run, the monthly speaking academy, that kind of what do you hate? The one thing that comes up is road rage.
Yeah.
And it's that, isn't it? Because it's tribal, it's primal. It's like, you are not cutting me up. It's kind of like we think that you have woken up this morning to shoot past me and cut me up just because, you know what I mean, you're a dick or something like that.
I just don't want to contribute to the traffic jam when there's a road available for 600 yards that's doing nothing.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. But I just love the fact that those two things, that they're both really prevalent in our worlds, and we hear that a lot. So yeah, there we go. Exactly. I remember kind of A4174. You mentioned that. That's for those not local to Bristol. It's a major dual carriageway ring road that goes around Bristol, or some of the way around. They never finished it, I think. Anyway, that there's this kind of is it a 2+ lane kind of thing?
Yeah.
Right? So even without the kind of the merging, 2+ lane. And you see people like shooting them down it and stuff. And I remember this is probably why I left social media. I tweeted Avon and Somerset Police saying, like, is this thing actually policed, or can we just all go down the line? He said, "Oh, we caught 28 people last year." 28 people. I'll take my chances.
That's 28 in a day, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but anyway, I digress. We could probably have a whole show about road rage and what it sounds like. So, anyway, so back in the room. So the question I ask all of my guests on here, and this will form a kind of a playlist that's going to be available at the end of season 2, is what would your walk-on music be? So setting the scene, 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing at O2 Arena in London. I am the MC. I'm just about to call your name, and your walk-on music kicks in. That one song that motivates you, that lifts you, gets your energy at peak state. As you walk onto the stage, what would your track be, Patch Warner?
Very, very easy. It's never changed, and it's Metallica Enter Sandman, because that first minute is just unbelievable. It almost ruins it when they start singing. But
I love that.
Yeah, I know Brock Lesnar in the MMA world and UFC, he would come on to that, and yeah. I don't know what else it would be, to be honest.
Amazing. Great shout. Thank you so much. I had a great mashup recently of Metallica and James Brown. Okay. I think it was Super Bad. It was a song that they mashed up. Anyway, check it out. It's on YouTube.
No, I definitely will.
Anyway, genuinely, there's another rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, there's so many great Metallica songs, and that chills me out listening to that, which sounds weird because it's quite offensive on the ears and loud. But that's, everyone's different. Everyone gets a chill out point different, don't they? Country music for you. I'm a fan of country music because we've got family in America. And always remember going over there as a kid, and it would be country music on, Garth Brooks and things like that. Yeah, fantastic.
So you mentioned Garth Brooks over here. They say he used to play right back for QPR. That's Garth Brooks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, Patch, we're definitely going to get back to season 3, so we'll welcome you back very shortly. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patch Warner.
Thanks for having me on, Nick. I've really enjoyed the chat. As I said at the start, it's strange for me to be asked the questions, so I've really enjoyed that.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much, and thanks for giving your busy time to us in your man cave. We appreciate being welcomed into your man cave with open arms. So for everybody else, please stay tuned for the next episode of the Forge Ahead Show, which is coming out tomorrow. So it'll be day 2 of a 5-day podcast a day episode release. And that will wrap up season 2. So the playlist will happen next week. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, stay well, stay happy, and I will catch you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. And that's a wrap. A big thank you for tuning in to today's show. Please stay tuned and hit subscribe for future episodes, bringing you amazing guests, sharing amazing content and amazing insights. Really excited to bring you these. The Forge Ahead Show is sponsored by nickelston.com. If you want to connect with me, you can find all the ways possible through the website. If you want to drop me a message, always great to hear from you. But in the meantime, if I don't catch you before, I'll see you at the next episode. And you take care, guys. Cheers now. Bye. Bye-bye.